This is the Creek midweek.
Come on now, people. Come on now, people. Come on now, people. Gonna praise the Lord. Come on now, church. Come on now, church. Come on now, church. Gonna praise the Lord.
Well, welcome to episode 4 of the Creek midweek. I'm Austin Upchurch, your host. I'm here today, as always, with our lead pastor, Trevor Barton. Trevor, how you doing today?
Doing good, Austin. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And, of course, we have a special guest with us today, Pastor John Welborn out of Staten Island. John, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Austin. I'm glad to be here with you guys.
So for those of you who have been tuning in, you know what's up. But for those of you who are new, typically Trevor and I are going to have conversations on the Midweek podcast about the sermon from the past week and about things going on in the world and such. Today we're going to break a little bit from that format, because obviously the situation with COVID-19 going on in the world, and Pastor John is right there at the epicenter in the U.S., and so we wanted to bring him in and talk with him. He's been such a friend of our church and a friend with Pastor Trevor, and so I'm going to hand this baby off to Pastor Trevor, and we'll let them have a conversation, and we'll see what happens. It should be a great one. Thanks again, John.
Mm-hmm.
How's it going, John?
We're doing okay, buddy. How are you?
Good. Good to see you. How's Ashley?
She's all right. She's adjusting to what it looks like to be a homeschool mom, which is something that she never intended to be, but she is. She's in the middle of it right now and handling things really, really well. You know, I've been impressed. She's one of those jack of all trades individuals. She can design, she can sing, she can write music, she can run a business. So now, you know, she's approached this homeschooling thing like everything else she's attempted, which is just with gusto and intelligence and skill. So impressed with her. She's doing well. The kid's doing good too.
Well, as Austin said, and as you well know, and many of the people who are listening or watching know, New York City right now, as we're talking about this, is really the epicenter of what's going on as it relates to the coronavirus in the United States. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But I was just thinking before we got started, you and we have been friends for quite a while now.
A long time.
2005.
Yeah, I think actually it was in December of 2004. I still remember.
That's true.
Yeah, we showed up in Gatlinburg for the Extreme Winter Conference, and Pastor Johnny introduced us, and that would have been right before New Year's 2000 and bringing in 2005. So we hung out in Gatlinburg.
Confirms that every lasting friendship really begins in Gatlinburg.
It does, and at Outback Steakhouse too. So that helps as well.
I mean, ministry, friendship, Gatlinburg, those are three things that always go together.
They all go hand in hand, without a doubt. No question.
At some point, if you're in ministry and you make friends, sooner or later, you're gonna be there in Gatlinburg together, typically at a conference, probably having some food, but it has been a long time. And you've been pastoring now on Staten Island at Salem Church for how long? How long have you been there now?
We're in our 5th year, so 4+. We came in late 2015 and been there, since then. So yeah, going on 5 years right now.
So tell us a little bit, just so folks can know a little bit of your story. You're the son of a pastor, and you were in evangelism for quite a while. Just walk us through, the short story of your career in ministry and your experience and how you wound up in Staten Island to begin with.
Yeah, no, it's a long story. I'll try to make short, but saved as a young boy and called to ministry as a teenager. I began traveling and preaching as an evangelist early in my teenage years, and went through my school at Liberty University and Southeastern Seminary the whole time, really convinced God had me as an evangelist. And that process began doing mission trips, leading mission trips, taking churches with me to different places around the country and around the world. And in that process, got a heart for New York City, just fell in love with this city, felt a draw to this city, knowing that it's the largest city in the United States, and I believe the most influential city in the world. When you read the book of Acts, you see Paul's ambition to get to Rome, to take the gospel to the city of Rome. because the belief was if all roads lead to Rome, then all roads lead away from Rome. And if you can reach Rome, you can reach the world. And my hope and desire was to one day be a part of a church planting movement in this city, and didn't know how the Lord would ever, or if the Lord would ever fulfill that desire in me. And over the course of time, God called me out of evangelism and into local church pastoring. And for 7 years, I pastored in a rural part of Virginia, in the western part of Virginia. Trevor, you've been there. You preached for me in Harrisonburg. And
Great church.
anyway, yeah, we had a great time there. It was a revitalization of church that was in trouble with debt and construction issues, and God turned it around, and they're doing great work now. But anyway, we were serving in Virginia and open to whatever the Lord may have for us, and the door opened for us to relocate to Staten Island, which is one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, and to pastor a relatively healthy, established church on Staten Island to help it for the first time in its history start planting churches. And that's what we moved here to do, was to help Salem Church to make disciples and multiply churches. So that led us to this place. And we've fallen in love here and found our family here. And we're all in on this effort. And in the beginning of this year, had launched our first church, actually out of Salem in January. And so we plan many more in the future.
So, during this season that we're all in, we're trying to obviously just react day by day as it relates to ministry, and figure out, what are we going to do next, because everything keeps evolving, everything keeps changing. But you're a Southern boy. You grew up down South. And, when we think about, a guy from down in Georgia moving to the Northeast, to the greater New York City area, Staten Island, there had to be a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of, oh man, this is not my culture. This hasn't been my culture historically. So how did you prepare your transition from the world and the culture that you had known down, in the deep South, to moving to the Northeast? Was it drastically different? Was there not a lot of difference that you discovered? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, there's not a lot you can do that would prepare you for that kind of a cultural transition. I know when I was in Virginia, I read a book by Ed Stetzer called Breaking Missional Code. Really helpful text in terms of approaching whatever mission field that may be. It may be your own backyard where you grew up and are born and raised, or it may be, like for us, an entirely foreign area than anything we've known. But approaching your immediate ministry context like a mission field, like a missionary would approach a mission field. So if we send a missionary to Germany, we expect them to learn German. We expect them to understand the customs and the culture of Germany. And Ed wrote this great book, and it helps you understand a bit about how you read the culture and where the constructs are, and how to be effective in that ministry environment. So we were kind of already doing that in Virginia, and doing our best to read the cultural landscape and react accordingly. And so a lot of the same things we were looking for in New York, to see what it was going to take, not only to reach New York, because New York is a massive city with hundreds of neighborhoods, and each neighborhood is different. Each neighborhood has its own identity. So we needed to figure out what it looked like to reach people and make disciples on the North Shore of Staten Island specifically. And so there were things we could do to prepare, but nothing prepares you, until you get here and get to work. The great philosopher Mike Tyson liked to say, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I can say that we've been punched in the mouth several times since we arrived. And so our plan was a good plan, but yet it took some shots, and we've had to readjust it as we've gone on. Family adjustment, going from having a nice big house with 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms and big yard and all that kind of stuff, to living where we live now, which is a much, much smaller place that costs astronomically more than anything we had in the South. And so adjusting sort of our expectations on the kind of lifestyle we can lead, adjusting to just the intensity of the people everywhere. Everywhere you turn, there are people. There's just sirens and activity and intensity. So those are all things that it's taken time to adjust to. I can't say that I really prepared for those things. Ministry wise, it takes a little bit longer to build trust with people, for them to believe that you love them and you're not after something from them. And so being patient in our ministry model, doing things that are a lot more pre-evangelism than overt direct evangelism. And another thing is trying to make sure we're empowering our people to go make disciples in their families and neighborhoods and workplaces as well, and not just saying, hey, invite everybody to church and we'll evangelize them for you. We don't have the space for that, for one, but then secondly, it's not as effective as individuals carrying the gospel and making disciples in a one-on-one context. So those are a few things.
So I've been in your church a couple of times. Great church, and probably my favorite place to speak outside of the creek. I mean, I just, the first time that I was there, I was just struck by how multi-ethnic it was. I mean, I felt like I was just preaching to nations under one roof, and that was a beautiful thing, and it was inspiring, and I was so excited for you, and so excited for the difference that you were clearly making, and the influence that you were extending among these folks, and God's been really gracious to your leadership and to the church. I mean, it is so hospitable. I mean, the warmth and the friendliness. Each time that I've been there, I took Shepherd one time and took Grayson another time, and we've just been blown away when we left there both times at, the kindness of the staff, the hospitality of the people, just the genuine atmosphere of worship inside the auditorium. And so a great church. You launch your new church in the first of the year in January. And then obviously, that brings us to, where we are today and what's happening in New York City with COVID-19. Walk us back as someone who's been on the ground, someone who's a local pastor, community leader. Walk us back as a dad, as a pastor, as a part of the community back a few weeks ago when this stuff started coming on the scene, and we're just beginning to hear about it. Walk us through what the changes have been like, and how quick things happened, and how the evolution from the first time you started hearing about it to where you are right now in the midst of a hot zone. Just give us an overview of what these past few weeks have been like.
Well, it's been interesting. New York is such a unique bird in that, we have our own economy here that is so massive and so, so unique to us. A lot of times things around the world don't really register here like they do in other places. And so New York almost feels like it's insulated from so much of that because of the strength of our city. And that was definitely the case here. I mean, you could go back and look, and it was late February, and our city leaders were still, encouraging gatherings, everybody get together and, have parties and do the parades. I mean, somebody's protesting every single day here, something, so they were always encouraging those things. And, there was no hesitation. I mean, it was China's problem, and then it was Italy's problem, and it wasn't our problem at all. Not realizing or not taking into account the fact that we have 3 major airports in this city. Every single one of them is bringing people from all over the globe, including Italy and including China, every single day. And not only that, we have the most densely populated area in the entire United States. So if it touched here, it was going to touch here and spread incredibly quickly. And that was just not something I don't think our city governments and leaders were ready for at this point, whenever it began to break. So the last Sunday we met together as a church family, and say together in our 2 campuses, it had become an issue, and we just said, you know what, we're not going to pass offering plates. We're not going to shake hands. We're just going to, we're going to tell you what, we're just going to worship and try not to touch each other. You know what I mean? And it was almost like we were laughing at ourselves even saying that, because it was like, okay, this, big bad thing that, that nobody knows anything about is out there. And how quickly it changed. I mean, we went from that on Sunday to, by Wednesday of that week, we had called off services, and we'd shut things down, and we'd, and gone, gone internal with everything. And it happened so fast. I mean, so incredibly fast that we were sort of adjusting on the fly to figure out what this looks like and how are we supposed to. Now, thankfully, we as a church have developed an online presence, with our social media and our webpage. So we were able to move online pretty easily and quickly, and our staff, relatively young, able to adapt and adjust pretty quickly as well. So, that transition has turned in such a way that we've been able to keep moving, and we've had adjustments in terms of giving and ministry models and events that had to be canceled. And we're trying to answer the question about our, other things like our campus and things like that. What does that look like in this new season? For me as a father and a husband, I'm not from here, as you mentioned, so I don't have any family in town. It's just us, it's 5 of us, and our church has become our family. I do have a brother in Georgia that has a big, farm in North Georgia with a guest house over his garage, and he called to say, hey, look, you guys need to come on down here, and we don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know how bad it's going to get in New York. And so we considered the idea of moving, the family down to my brother's farm in Georgia for a season and just letting it see if what it looks like. Cause we didn't know at that point, shelter in place orders and, travel bans, and we didn't know what was in store for us. And Ashley and I prayed and we argued back and forth on it. She would take a position and I'd argue against it. Then we'd swap positions and argue some more, what we should do. We had no idea what to do. None of us had ever been through this before. But ultimately, it came down to the conclusion that God had called us to New York City and God had called us to Salem Church. And at the end of this, when it's all said and done, we want to be able to say to our people, we went through this with you. We did not run from this. We did not go off from the country because we happen to have family with these kind of resources. We stayed to go through this with you. So here we are. We're still here in New York. I'm in my attic right now, and I'm trying to get some work done and continue to serve our people through this. And so it was an important moment. And when we made that decision to stay here as opposed to go, for us, it just it took the pressure off of just saying, you know what, all right, this is the call. This is what God's called us to do. We're going to stick it out here and ride it out here and just serve in any way we possibly can. Now that's the tricky part though, is how do we serve in the midst of this pandemic? Salem has a long history of responding to crisis. Hurricane Sandy 7 years ago was a major one, and Salem Church became a hub of resources for the entire North Shore Staten Island. And same thing, 9/11, going on 19 years ago now, they were involved in that. But this crisis, what do you do? How do you do it? And we're our elders and staff are every day trying to figure that out. How do we serve our neighbors in the midst of this pandemic? And what do we do to show the love of Jesus through it? So that's been the journey for me and for my family and our church family.
So you have been meeting digitally for how many weeks now?
What is it? 3? Is that right? I'm trying to think. I think it's been 3. We've, I was originally going to the church to shoot the messages and our worship team was getting together. But it was a matter of moments, until we realized that there are members of our worship team that have tested positive. And now it went so fast to where it went from this issue is out there, we got to do it eventually to where it's in our church. It's on our doorstep. We've had dozens of people infected already. We've had multiple people pass away already. I did a funeral last week for one of our most dedicated volunteers. And the funeral home allowed 5 people, my wife, myself, the son, another nephew, and one other person. We're the only ones allowed outside of their cars to gather at the graveside. So it hit us so quickly, so fast that we had to go from one plan that we put in place to now we're all in our houses and we're not, everything's being done internally from the house. I'm preaching from the house. Our worship team is shooting videos and our worship pastor is editing those together for a full worship team to put together a broadcast. It's really beautiful how it's working. But yeah, I think that's been 3 weeks, 3 Sundays.
So, a lot of times, in Kentucky, give you a little bit of our story. We are now getting ready into Easter weekend. This will be our 5th week of being just online. So even a couple of weeks before, what was happening in New York really came to the forefront in Kentucky, we were asked, 4 Sundays ago to not meet and to begin the social distancing. But even here in Kentucky, we're not really predicted to have a peak until the 2nd, 3rd week of June, somewhere along those lines. But sometimes, being in another part of the country and even hearing about what's happening in another part of the country, this and a little bit of what you talked about a minute ago. We hear what's happening in Italy. We hear what's happening in China. It just doesn't resonate with us. It doesn't feel real. And even though, we can watch your governor give those daily press conferences and we're listening and we're seeing the numbers and we can be like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. It's horrible. But what would you say as someone who's on the ground going through it? We've all been on the other side and we've heard about things going on somewhere else. What are some of the things we don't know about what it's like there? What's some of the things we can't pick up on through the media or just through a press conference? What seems to be the emotion of the people that you're leading and that you're talking to? Are people, deeply worried? Is this a thing that, they're not sure how long this is going to last? What seems to be the mentality of the folks that you're talking to on the ground?
There's 2 realities in New York right now. There's the reality of the hospitals, and then there's the reality of everything else. And that's the case within my church family as well. There's a reality of the healthcare workers, and then there's a reality of everyone else. You have a unique perspective on that because you're married to someone who's in that healthcare arena. It's like the hospitals are overwhelmed right now. The hospital workers are exhausted and fearful and stressed to the max. We had our small group met Sunday night, and we've got a couple of nurses in our small group that were able to pop on with us for a bit, and you can just look at them and see. I mean, you're talking about high levels of demand and stress, of how to manage this crisis, whereas the rest of the city has adjusted and is shut down. I mean, like you're not, the Fifth Avenue is a ghost town. I mean, you've never seen New York like this ever. It's normally crawling with business people and with tourists and with in shops open and activities. What everybody loves about New York City. That's why they say there's nothing like New York. It's unlike any other place on the planet. But right now, it's the rest of the city have basically identified either we're part of the solution or we're part of the problem. And by being part of the solution means social distancing, means keeping yourself healthy. It means keeping yourself from being part of the problem by getting sick or getting out or being foolish. So we're basically being asked, and we're responding obediently to our governing officials that we're supposed to shelter in place and to hold up where we are, keep ourselves from getting sick, and let the medical professionals do their job and get us over this apex. So I think that's the first thing that I would say about New York. I mean, the horror stories of our hospitals are very real, very real. It's actually happening here. They turned the largest convention center in New York City into the largest hospital in the United States, 2,500 beds at the Javits Center on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. The USNS Comfort has arrived, and they're docked, and they can handle up to 1,000 people. As a floating hospital, so that's docked in Midtown, ready to take people. So people are stepping up, and those things are happening, and the medical community is feverishly working to address this crisis. And everyone else is being instructed to take a seat, and stay healthy, stay out of the way, stay in your homes. And they responded that way, for the city that never sleeps to now not even come out of your house is a massive, massive change. So I love my city, and I'm very impressed by this. The fact that, New Yorkers are tough, and they don't usually take orders from anybody. But it's been interesting to see, I mean, the way that they responded to these instructions and responded strongly and well. My house is on a park, so I look out my window right now and down into the park of my neighborhood, and I'm watching people, and there are people in the park, but they're distancing. They're wearing masks. They're staying away from others. They're being wise. And so I'm proud of my city in that regard, and proud of the fact that they're heeding the advice. And there is a fear factor too. There's a fear factor usually when it comes to either those most vulnerable, because all of us know people who have underlying health conditions or are senior adults and would be more vulnerable. We all are concerned for those, but we're also concerned about the future. The city runs on money. It's a center of commerce for the world. And what does this look like? How do we even go back to life as we knew it before? What jobs are going to be there? What businesses are still going to be open? What opportunities are going to be out there? Is this going to start? And if it does, how bad of a new recession? What are our home values going to be? What are our career prospects going to be? What are going to be the ways in which we re-engage in the culture and in the world? And what does that process look like? The governor began to talk about that today on his press conference about, you don't just flip a switch and all of a sudden we're back to normal. There's going to be a process by which we begin to engage again and begin to exercise commerce again. So, I would just say the fears are grounded in health, first of all, but then also grounded in future commerce. What does the new world look like after this has all subsided?
Talking about the new world, whatever that is, we just got through with a staff meeting a few minutes ago before we started this conversation, and we were talking about the fact that there's a lot of folks with a lot of conjecture, a lot of folks with speculation, predictions about what the world's going to look like, what American culture is going to look like, what church culture is going to look like after we get through this. And I'm one of those who tend to believe that things will change in some ways. And I don't know what those ways will be or to what degree, but history seems to suggest that after pandemics like this, that there are social changes and economic changes and institutional changes that happen as a result of it. I guess just as a way of, because pastors do this, we try to imagine the future. We try to, as you moving from Georgia to New York and Staten Island, get to know the culture, understand the culture. So moving forward, with who knows how long all of this is going to, just go on. What kind of changes in the local church, or what type of church, or what type of differences do you see in ministry maybe on the other side of this? Or do you think it's too early to know anything?
Yeah, I think everybody's got opinions on it, like you said, and I don't know. I don't really pretend to be an expert on these things. I'd say more universally, I believe in God's kingdom advancing, and I believe we're headed toward a place where all things are restored to God, to the Creator of the world. And so I'm confident that's going to happen. That somehow, some way, God's going to use this for His glory. He's going to use this to advance His kingdom, and we're going to see Him somehow, some way working in and amongst all of this to restore all things to Himself. So that I'm confident of. The second thing I'm confident of is the church universal and the church local expressions have a very important role to play in that process for God. And so because God is unchanging, and God is eternal, and God is omnipotent, I know He has a place for His bride in that journey. So I don't spell gloom and doom for the church. I don't spell gloom and doom for His body across the world. And I think there's going to be a way that He uses all of this for His glory and to advance His church. Now, the particulars, I have no idea what that looks like. I could not even begin to tell you, what this means for large gatherings, or what this means for the way we greet one another, and, holy handshakes and holy kisses, and whether out the window from now on or what. I couldn't begin to tell you those things, but I do know and believe with all confidence that we have a role to play in this recovery. I pastor a people that walked through 9/11, and they did so from ground zero. I mean, everyone in our church knows someone who died, in the Twin Towers as they collapsed. Everyone in our church, and every one of our church that was here during that time. When they begin to tell you about 9/11, they don't just remember it; they relive it. And as they relive it, their voice gets softer, their tone gets lower, and they can tell you about their experience during that season. And I think we're going to come out of this with a similar memory together, collectively. This is how we handled this. This is what happened as we walked through this together. And we're going to have a story to tell of God's sustaining grace and power for us, to us, and through us during this season. And we have to be sensitive to that. I think there's a certain measure of the playbook that needs to be thrown out, in terms of how we go about doing church and ministry, but also think that, that there's great value, and people are going to want to come back together when it's safe to do so. There's going to be a hunger for that, for assembly, for relationship, for connection, for community. And I think the church has a unique way to assemble that, like no other organization on the planet does, that we can assemble people, not just physically and not just emotionally, but spiritually, in a way that nobody else can. So
what kind of feedback? What kind of feedback are you getting 3 weeks into just online gatherings, no physical church? What are you learning about church in the digital sphere? What are you hearing from your people? What are you learning as a preacher, pastor, communicator? What's that like?
Well, I hate preaching to nobody, and I hate preaching sitting down. I've discovered that about myself. I despise that. I really do. And I've restructured my home, studio. I say that very loosely, studio, but my home studio environment where I have to be able to stand up. I can't keep sitting here on this chair and preach. So anyway, that's what I learned about myself, is that I'm a what do you call a picky preacher. So I don't like certain things. But anyway,
do you think it could just be that you need more cushion?
It could be that. It could be that.
It's not be comfortable.
I think what it is I sweat when I preach, and when I'm sitting down, that sweat just continues to multiply. It becomes extremely uncomfortable. You can edit this out of the podcast, Austin. But anyway, yeah. So
it's all good. I'm right there with you on that one.
Very good. Very good. The other question is, what have I learned about my people? I'm just, let me brag on what you said earlier about Salem Church is true. It's a special place, special people, but you don't even know the half of it, man. These people are amazing. And the word I would use to describe their reaction to all of this in terms of the church has been unbelievably grateful. They have been over the moon grateful for the fact that we have gone to such lengths to provide them a worship gathering in their home that they and their kids and their families can participate in, and they'll do whatever it takes in order to approach it. I think a lot of times in the desire to reach new people and the desire to have the best technology and the most comfortable buildings and all the best ministry spaces and environments, all those kind of things, it's like we begin to think that our people need those things, or they have to have those things, in order to connect with God and worship. And it's simply not true. Our people love Jesus and they want to worship with their church family, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to be a part of that gathering. And this is proving it to us. And they don't want to be a bother. They don't want to be a bother to the, to their church unnecessarily. So we're offering, hey, call us or email us and we'll call you and we'll pray with you. They're not even really doing a lot of that. I mean, they're trying to leave it for the real serious needs, even the high maintenance members. And I'm not going to say who they are, and I'm sure you don't have any high maintenance members down in Kentucky, but even the high maintenance members have stepped back a bit, in terms of giving us space to do what we've got to do. And so the people have been grateful. I've been overwhelmed by their willingness to adjust and buy in to a new rhythm right now. And I'm just complaining about having to sit down and preach to a camera, but that's something I'm learning about myself.
So Easter, this is going to be the first Easter of its kind for any of us.
Yep.
What are you planning for Easter? Are you speaking, just as if the same type of message that you would if you were gathering physically? Are you going to speak specifically to the situation through the eyes of Easter? So what do you have planned coming up for Easter weekend?
Easter weekend, we'll do a Good Friday service. It'll be a really cool environment. I think it's going to be cool. Anyway, we're setting it up for our church family to gather around their tables. So I released a video today, and I released a letter to our church family today saying, look, for Friday night, 7:30, get your computer, your phone, whatever you use, and I want you to sit around your table with your family, and I want you to get some, juice if you have it, and bread if you have it. If not, water and a cracker, whatever you got. And get everybody around the table and get ready. And I'm going to facilitate from my table with my family a Good Friday service with communion to our families of our church gathered around their tables. And so I'm excited about that. It'll be a 60-minute gathering, and I'll teach on the cross, and we'll take communion together. We'll have some music and that kind of thing as well. Then Easter Sunday, we are pre-shooting and recording everything from our houses. We'll have I think a choir of like 22 people are sending in their videos from their houses, and our worship team, our media team is like mixing all that together. So we'll have a full-blown choir as a part of the broadcast on Easter. We'll do live from our website and from Facebook. We'll do it 5 p.m. on Saturday, 9, 10:45, and 12:30 on Sunday. Those are the service times we were going to have live before all this started. So, no, I'm going to preach on the resurrection, man. I really stuck with my series. I've stuck with it and wrestled with it too. I know you and I talked early on in this. And I asked you and several other guys, what are y'all doing? And we all wrestled through sort of what we needed to do. And I stuck with the series that I was in through the Gospel of Luke because I think it worked well for the cultural moment we were in. And so Easter Sunday is going to be a great, big, huge celebration of the resurrection, and it'll be all about celebrating the fact that a risen Christ gives us hope beyond this life and life to the next. And that'll be from Luke 24. And then I'll jump over to 1 Corinthians 15 and, where Paul says that if all we have in Jesus is hope for this life alone, then we're to be pitied above all people. So really, I think it's a relevant moment for us to remember the fact that the hope that we have in Christ is not just about health. It's not just about physical life, because whether we're healthy or sick, we live or we die, we have hope in Christ grounded in him, and it is an eternal hope that lasts for all eternity that we can hold on to. And so that's my plan for the weekend, and we're asking people to shoot 60-second videos of their testimony, and we use a lot of those. So that's the plan at this point for Easter weekend. But you're right, it's unlike any Easter weekend that the world has ever seen before, and we're praying that God use it for His glory.
So this may not be something other people are interested in, but since we're talking, I don't want to geek out on it too much and don't want to get too technical about it. But it seems to be that this moment, this season, and I guess the volume on this could be turned up depending on how long the duration of all of this is. But, there's a lot of things that, churches, certain tribes within Christianity, certain denominations within Christianity, certain people, certain pastors, leaders, some things that seemed really, really important on the front side of all of this about church, about, things like church polity, how churches are organized and structured and how they're ran, who can baptize, who can't, who can serve communion and who can't. And in a world where the pastors are locked in houses and can't be present, it really is causing the church to think, I think, more thoughtfully. I'm hopeful for that, thoughtfully through some of these things, because there's just some things that are not logistically possible during this season. What's some of your thoughts on that? That, depending on how long something like this goes, how it may force the church or cause us to rethink or approach some things that we've just taken for granted over the years.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's church polity stuff. There's theological things. There are denominational differences. There's pragmatism at play. What I hope happens with this is that we all get back to the essentials of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, instead of making an enormous deal about how you only have one service and refuse to be multi-site, or you only have certain ways you're willing to do communion ever, or that only one type of ministry is godly or biblical. What I'd love to see happen throughout all this is that we all give each other a whole heck of a bunch of grace to understand that each local body of believers needs to figure this out and help each other figure this out, and not be so entrenched in our theological camps, and lobbing grenades at other theological camps. So I really have enjoyed seeing how that's happening a bit, and how churches are adjusting and pastors are being more gracious to one another, at least in some circles. I know it's not happening in all circles by any means, but I think all of us need to just kind of let's get back to it. Let's get back to the essentials. What do we really know and believe, and what is a secondary thing that we can shelve for now? And I agree. I would never, in a service, serve water and a cracker, in a normal circumstance for communion, because the symbolism of the juice and the unleavened bread is powerful. But yet that doesn't matter right now. What matters right now is remembering the body of Jesus broken for us, and remembering his blood shed for us. And so if all we can do is video conferencing with water and a cracker, then that's that. And I think there's a glorious simplicity to that too, that hopefully will be appreciated around the body of Christ and the way that we love one another. I do think that there's a lot of craziness when it comes to the health and wealth crowd and the prosperity gospel that hopefully will fall by the wayside during all of this as well, where people are able to see the lie for what that's there, and it's always been there. If you look into the developing world and the parts of the world that are that are impoverished deeply, I mean the prosperity gospel can't be preached there, and it's hard to preach it right now in this scenario and situation too. So
we talked a couple of weeks ago about, theology such like the prosperity gospel, like, if you have faith, then God's going to physically, materially bless you, and that type of thing. That there are certain circles within Christendom that are finding difficulty finding their voice, finding their footing in the middle of all of this, because their traditional message, traditional approach, it just doesn't provide a lot of traction in the midst of really a global tailspin. What felt like hope before kind of just seems like hype, and what seemed like a feel-good message now kind of comes across as, this seems empty. This seems to be, very, it just seems what it is, not true. So I think that, there's some things happening that could be great assets for the church moving forward.
No doubt. And I would say that too, that where we are now is more likened to the backgrounds of the New Testament than where we were a month ago. We are living in an environment that is far more conducive to biblical Christianity than what the United States was experiencing 6 weeks ago. And I think we need to get back to the scripture in the terms of saying, okay, how do we live in the midst of global fear and pressure and uncertainty? And how does the church carry a message of great hope and confidence? Again, not that if you have faith, you're going to make money, and if you have faith, you're going to be healthy. That wasn't the message of the early church. It wouldn't have flown with the early church. For Pete's sake, their leader was crucified naked on a Roman cross. So I think we're going to have an opportunity in this season to show where the true hope in Christ lies, that it lies in being reconciled to God through Jesus Christ, and knowing that whether we're healthy or we're sick, whether we live or we die, we have hope, and it can be embraced and understood as an eternal hope.
Trevor, we didn't prepare John for this, but I think that's worthy of the. I think that was worthy of the amen button. All right, sorry.
I was waiting. I knew what he was up to. I knew what was about to happen. I've asked him if he could just make me a portable one of those so I could just take it around with me whenever I kind of feel like it's necessary. I could just,
put a speaker in your back pocket, man, and push a button.
Boom.
Hallelujah.
But I think that, we were talking about in our church the past couple of weeks, about the true essence of faith. If you have a misunderstanding of faith, it can actually undermine your faith. Mm-hmm. There's two sides of faith. There were the people in Hebrews 11 that escaped the lion, and then there were people in Hebrews chapter 11 who were victim to the lion.
On him too.
And you have both and we really can't make a predictable outcome of what things are going to look like when you walk by faith. That's just in the hands of a providential, caring, loving Father. But with all of that in the midst of what's happening, it really does, I think, help us get back to a stronger faith that confronts reality, whatever that reality is, doesn't try to create an alternative pseudo reality that we can drop into and kind of ignore everything that's going on. Because when you're in the middle of something like this, there's just nowhere you can go to get away from it. You may be insulated in an ivory tower, so to speak, but sooner or later, the consequences or the ripple effects, they're going to knock on your door, and probably already have to some shape, form, or fashion. So I think that this is there's so many good things in the midst of all of this bad stuff that nobody wanted to see happen. And so what's your plans after Easter? Anything else you got on the calendar that you guys at Salem are thinking about doing in the weeks after?
Well, Salem is one thing. It's hard for me to get past my wife's honey-do list right now. Since we're all locked up, she's had me clean the garage and the basement and redoing cabinets and all kinds of stuff. So if I ever get free from her, I'm excited about leading my church family to all kinds of ministry outreach and that kind of thing. We're working with the church in Jersey right now. They were on Fox and Friends yesterday, promoting their boxes of hope. Basically what they're doing is they're assembling boxes of basic essentials. We're talking non-perishable foods, cleaning products, that kind of thing. And we're setting ourselves up to be a distribution center for those. So hopefully we'll be able to get busy on that in the next week or so. We have to abide by all the guidelines, the masks, the gloves, the distancing, within our facility. But we would like to be able to start delivering those boxes to neighbors that need them as soon as possible, because there's a lot of people that have to self-quarantine and shelter in place. So I want to lead our church to get active on that. There's a website that we've already cultivated there for people to be a part of it. It's salemchurchnyc.org/help. And that's a place where you can give help, get help, and also give direct if you need to or like to. But that's one of the things as far as community service is concerned. When we can start assembling again and kind of start digging out of all of this, I'm sure we'll have other needs that will present themselves and ways in which we can serve our community, and so, we're getting through it and trusting God in it, and then seeing in what ways he may want us to adjust our plans to fit his.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate days, but it's challenging, but there's that. And you know what I'm saying when I say this. It may not be the best word, but there is a sense of excitement about what's going to happen as a result of all of this. The just unrestricted flow of grace from the local church and love and generosity, and who knows where all of those consequences will land. And so there is a sense of I can't wait to see what God does through all this bad as he turns it for good and obviously brings himself glory as he does it. So I think there is a sense of, the local church survived Nero, Domitian. We've been through the plagues before. We made it through communism. We have faced economic catastrophe and scandals and schisms and the whole bucket of things that could happen and go wrong. We faced it, and Jesus is still building his church. And that's the promise we hold on to. And the kingdom is still, it is, but not yet. And as he brings that into full fruition, we're just going to be partners in it, whether in Staten Island or here in Kentucky. And I'm just so grateful for everything you're doing. I'm so grateful for your friendship. Love you and Ashley. Love the kids. And I know that Salem Church probably knows this, but I hope they know to the full extent of just how great of a gift that you and Ashley are to them, and to be there and to lead them through what's going to be one of those things that mark a generation. What a great thing to have in a pastor and a shepherd and a leader and a preacher like you. And so I'm very grateful for them that they have you, and just praying for you, praying for your family. I want you to stay safe. And if the Creek Church, if we can help in any way, enable you to be able to serve your community better, then obviously, you've got my cell phone number, and I'm sure you won't hesitate. One thing you learn from Pastor Johnny, I'm sure, is you won't hesitate to ask.
No. We know how to ask, my man. I appreciate that. I appreciate your prayer and support. I appreciate your friendship beyond anything you'll ever know. Allison, your sons are so dear to Ashley and I, and we love you. We miss you, and the story of the Creek Church, man. I've obviously followed from the very beginning. I think you and I, had some of the first conversations about you going up there and being a part of that church family there, and I it's been nothing short of a miracle what God has done there in Eastern Kentucky, and I'm celebrating with you over what God has done in and through you, and what He continues to do through that ministry. You're a dear friend, and your family is very special, and I know your church does, because I've preached and talked to them. They know and appreciate your leadership over their ministry, and I'm praying for you too. And if there's anything I can do to serve you guys, I want you to let me know as well.
I think, as we wrap it up, I just couldn't help but think, I really hope people never give up on long-term friendships, because there are such blessings and such joy, and it's not all roses and tulips. There's ups and downs, and there's seasons of distance and just seasons of busyness, but really few things can compare to going long term with a friend, and just being there through life experiences, and to see what God does in their life, and to see what God does through them. I mean, it really is that's a richness that you just can't get in any other area of life. You have your family, and you're going to go long, God willing, and hopefully with them. But I just see so many people at the first hint of turbulence, they just check out a friendship. They just say, okay, this is it. It's over. We had a problem, and you disappointed me, and they just kind of move on, and seemingly kind of forget the friendship that was. But it's just such a great thing now that we're coming into, since December of 2004, and here we are in April of 2020. It's just been a great thing to see, what God's done in your life, from Georgia to Virginia to New York, and to see your family grow and prosper and be blessed. It really is gratifying. And so thank you for not only being a friend, but being a friend that has stuck around now for over a decade, because that makes it even better in my opinion.
Well, I'm just praying for you. One day you're going to make something of yourself, and I really look forward to seeing that.
Keep praying.
Hey, I've always got the kitchen. Have you seen
Have you seen his show? Have you seen his Pastor's Kitchen cooking show, John?
I have. Well, I know I've been cooked for in his kitchen, but I don't know that I've ever seen the show about it.
You need to check it out on Instagram, my man. I mean, it was birthed out of this whole quarantine social distancing thing. I'm showing people how to make anything from gourmet burgers to meatloaf to beef bourguignon.
Yeah, you've got it, man. I grilled pork chops last night for my family, but the grilling is about as far as it goes. You've got the skill, man. You can do it.
If I knew more Presbyterians, I'd show them how to pair it with the perfect wine. But since I live in Baptist country,
you can do that. Yeah, that'll fly up here, not where you're at, though.
Grape juice, guys. Come on.
All right. Well, John, thank you so much for being with us, and love you, praying for you, and we'll let Austin take it from here.
All right.
Yeah, I couldn't find your Instagram, John. Do you have Instagram? But I found your Twitter. Is that where you roll?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. My wife is, but I'm not.
Okay. Well, if you want to follow John, you should definitely do that. JohnWelborn. That's JohnWelborn. You can follow him on Twitter, or you can check out the church at salemchurchnyc.org. Right? All right.
That's correct. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening, for watching. We would love it if you would take the moment to comment, subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff. That'll help us out. Please stay safe, stay wise. We love you. Have a great week.